Good afternoon and welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival. My name is Aira Sarza and I'm a member of the programming team here at TIFF. I am very pleased to introduce today the film Rojo by Argentinian director Benjamin Neistat. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We're very pleased and very grateful to have the opportunity to work in this community. This film is eligible for the Toronto Platform Prize presented by Air France. Rojo is also eligible for the Gross People's Choice Award. Please vote for your favorite films at tiff.net/vote. We would like to thank Luxbox for providing us with this film, and thank you also to ICA for their generous support. Benjamin Neistat was born in Buenos Aires. He studied at the Universidad del Cine in that city and was recently a fellow at Harvard's Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. He made his directorial debut with the short film El Juego in 2010, followed by Historia del Mal in 2011. His feature films as writer-director are History of Fear, The Movement, and Rojo. We invite you all to stay in the room after the credits roll for a question and answer session with the filmmaker. But now, please to introduce Rojo, allow me to welcome Benjamin Neistat.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. How are you? How are you doing? We're very happy to be here. We have to thank the TIFF staff, which has been very kind to us. I would like to introduce one of the magnificent actors from the movie, the great Alfredo Castro, who is here present from Chile.
Hello, thanks. Thank you. I'm very happy being here, accompany Benjamin in his second film. And I think it's a very clever, sensitive film. And we share some horrible story of our dictatorships in our countries. So I'm very pleased being here. Thank you very much for coming.
So on my end, I don't like to speak very much before the screening so that you enter the film as fresh as you can, but I'll be happy to discuss and do some Q&A afterwards if you like to stay. So thanks again and enjoy as much as you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The questions related to the different kind of humanities, you mean?
The character, right? Him finding himself and realizing he's done something else.
Exactly. It's a very complex leading character, and the questions related to the different kinds of humanities that we see in this complex character, played by Dario Grandinetti. And the second one is related to the visual aesthetics of the film, sometimes very rich and vibrant images, and sometimes uses some blurred images. Thank you.
Okay, difficult questions. Question number one, I think, as you say, I would agree that there's different characters with different psychological backgrounds. Then again, I think it's quite a tight world, that of that movie, because everybody's so miserable. Nobody is actually, you know, a moral human being. They're all just trying to get away with different things. And I wanted to create a world like that because I think that's pretty much what happened in my country through the 70s in a large extent of the society. Just people thinking individually and, you know, looking elsewhere while a lot of things were going on. As for your second question, what you describe as blur, or you're probably talking about the fact that this movie intends to not only talk about the 70s, but reflect the filmmaking of the 70s, of which I'm a very big fan. So we used optics from the 70s, old Panavision lenses. Also, we added layers of grain in the digital image, and we worked a lot with the DOP. The great Pedro Sotero is a Brazilian DOP, to get a 70s look straight, which is probably less sharp and clean than the movies that you see nowadays.
There's a question in the back. Thank you. Since the counselor did nothing wrong, why did he feel that he had to take the investigator out to the desert?
through that's a good question. Through the script writing process, I thought a lot about that. There were versions in which he was more explicitly, he was killing the guy, shooting himself, the other strange person, the other strange man. But I think it's he hides the body because he can, and he just wants to avoid the whole hassle of having to explain and being him suspected in a particular time in which, things could link into darker areas and problems, and he knows that he will get away, and he just does it. It's a bit arbitrary on the script. Then again, I think it, as I said earlier, reflects a certain state of things through the decade.
Question in the back. Thank you. Why is the main character wearing a wig at the very end?
That's also something that came up very late just about when we were starting to shoot. The wig is awful, and I did a lot of research on taking looks at pictures and footage from the time, and I thought the looks were sometimes monsterish, the makeup and all, and a lot of men used to use very notorious wigs, as if they didn't care that you absolutely realized it was the wig. So I thought at that point in the movie where he just has been freed and he's coming open that he's a murderer and everybody's aware of that he would feel comfortable enough to put a wig, and the looks in the particular final sequence of the theater are particularly pushed into a monsterish, the makeup in the women and the people, they're starting to look worse as the movie comes to an end. Yeah.
Thank you.
You had sort of a sub-theme around young people with the story of the girl and her boyfriend and the dance. The dance kind of made me feel sort of hopeful, but the rest of the subplot around the young people felt not so hopeful. Can you talk about that a bit?
Talk a little bit about the sub-theme of young people along the story. At times hopeful, but very little, essentially hopeless.
Yeah, probably you felt hopeful because the dance is beautiful to look at. Then again, it's very naive. It's a dance. I mean, it's sort of an old opera. They're starting to rehearse, and they're part of these layers of complicity with a broader moral trauma that is starting in the country. So they couldn't be different from their parents and from the rest of the people. And the dance is maybe there to emphasize the naive side of this community, which is, dancing and, going to see a show while people are disappearing in front of their eyes. Yeah, I guess.
Question there. Thanks.
Yes. Of course. Yeah, that's a very good question, I think. First, there's a large tradition of making films about the 70s in Argentina. So my film is only one among a group of films that have been existing for years now. To my opinion, I mean, we have seen a lot of films in which there is an approach where, good and evil are portrayed in a manichaeistic approach or in a simpler output, but I thought that the moral journey of the spectator would be richer if this character is just strange, not a particular hero or a model or an idealist, as you very well say, many of the people who were disappeared were, but just someone harder to find out. But then again, he is murdered and disappeared, and that's out of the question. So I thought it's a clear-cut case anyway. It doesn't matter that he's he's strange or that he yells to the people. That doesn't matter, because I think that would create a richer debate or a richer discussion in the, as I said, in the tradition of all the films that have been made about the period.
Thank you. Question. What's the meaning of the title Rojo, which means red in English? And does it have to do with the eclipse, or how? Why is the title like that?
Yeah, I always get asked about the meaning of things, and I say an answer, but then sometimes I'm lying a little bit, because it's not like I know what everything means in there. That's part of the curious thing about making films. But then again, of course, it's linked to the eclipse, but it's also linked to the fact that there was a hysteria. I mean, this was during the context of the Cold War, so there was a hysteria about communism, and there was a fear of, left movements, which are usually identified with the color red, and it was even a color which was, not to be worn, and so on. So there's a number of layers about. It's also linked to blood, and so sort of synthesizes a lot of elements in the film.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about probably the final scene in the desert, where the character of Alfredo Castro has this religious discourse at some point about God before going back to Buenos Aires? Why did you make that decision?
Yeah, there is a religious side to him, because there was a great degree of complicity of the Catholic Church and the perpetrators of a genocide that was starting to take place in Argentina. So it would be very likable that he would be a religious person, even though he uses some in some strange way Christianity to justify the most awful deeds. And then you ask why he's going back, and because as he pretty much tells him textually, that he sort of forgives the man because he thinks he has acted in the right way in the eyes of God, who wants to cleanse the society. That would be the speech of the people who were in charge at the time. So he pretty much is a vehicle for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a lot of symbolism, but there are a few moments that I was sort of curious what they meant. The eclipse, why I chose that. And then when she goes into the woods to take a pee, there's a man who's watching the eclipse through a wilderness fence. It looks like there's something between them, or something's going to happen that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of symbolism in the movie, but especially why showing the eclipse, and when the character goes to the woods, there is someone who's watching the eclipse and watching her through a welder's mask. Why is that?
Yeah, as you say, since it's kind of it's not per se a genre movie, but it's sort of genre. It's sort of a thriller, and in genre you have a symbolic approach to filmmaking. So there's, as you say, a lot of symbols in that matter. The eclipse serves. I show the attitude of the people during the eclipse. First, they seem to be interested in it. Then they start playing football, and they just ignore the thing. There's even a guy telling the main character to look away, not to pay attention, and it's a red eclipse. So there's a whole layer of symbols playing there. About the guy with the welding mask, I did some research on eclipse, and it turns out there's people who are fanatics of eclipses. I even went to a meeting with them, and they showed me pictures of how they gather to watch eclipses, and they use welding masks, and it's pretty scary to when you find someone in the middle of nowhere with a. So I thought it would be like a nice little, even though it doesn't follow through afterward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh,
Yeah. Why is the detective Chilean? Would that mean anything to an Argentinian audience in particular that we're missing out here in North America?
Yeah, maybe some people can be unaware of it, but I think at the time in the 70s, the U.S. was financing a plan by the CIA, which was called the Condor Plan, which was money to put together all the militaries of the Latin America in order to chase across countries militants from left organizations that would cross to different countries. So it would make sense that there was a Chilean element doing that kind of thing in Argentina. It's likable. That actually happened a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Just wanted to ask about the music, how you thought about the music. I really enjoyed it. It's very intentional.
The music is very intentional throughout the film. How did you? Why did you choose this? How was the process of choosing the movie in the music in the film?
We worked with a very good Dutch film composer, very experienced, and we pretty much tried to imitate the certain scores of films that we really liked from the 70s, like the film Conversation by Francis Ford Coppola, and some of the music from Taxi Driver in terms of arrangement, instruments, and how we use it in the film. So it's part of our intention to get into a 70s film grammatic. Maybe some people relate to that, yeah.
Are there any questions? In the back.
The action takes place at the very end of Isabel's film.
Yes.
Does the action take place at the very end of Isabel?
Yes,
Perón's government.
You are very informed, as I see. In late 1975, there was still no military coup, but the very last part of a so-called democracy with Perón's wife. Perón had died in 74, and his wife was in charge, but in reality already a number of provinces were intervened and occupied by military forces. So it was sort of a transition to horror. Not many films deal with this time because it means a lot of controversy to speak about that particular part of that 75 year. But I thought it was important to set the movie there. Actually, I come from a family that was part of a revolutionary political party, and their house was burned in 1975. So I thought it was pertinent to work within that year.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How do you think the film will be received in Argentina? Because there's a lot of there are many films, as we have talked about, around the years of the dictatorship of filmmakers of the new contemporary Argentinian cinema. But this one in particular, of these particular years before it started, and using this aesthetics and just overall, how do you think Rojo is going to be received in?
Yeah, so far we haven't screened it there. We're opening in October. Really looking forward to that. I hope it creates some dialogue, some debate. We have a very bad situation over there right now, particularly in the economics, but also on the political side. There is a president which is from I would call a far right government, and he has called that the human rights policies, which were sort of policies of all the governments from 1983 to now, he has called that to be a heist, like something that is money throwing or unnecessary. So it's more than ever important to do films about the 70s, because the newer generations don't have, the experience of hearing about these things so much as maybe my generation. I was born in the 80s, so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Here, thanks.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the man with the gun in the locker room?
Yeah, that's. It was a time in which a lot of people were armed because of the context. It would be common to be armed and it made sense to put someone with a gun, just cleaning his gun in the locker room, and it was fun at the time in which the lawyer is starting to get more and more alienated to just put a shoot there, just to wake up who's sleeping in the theater also. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Investigator tell the person who employed him his theory? Like, it was not clear that the investigator actually dealt with the guy who brought him in to find evidence.
There's actually no, it seems that there's no resolution in how the crime investigation was solved. How did the investigator dealt with the person who actually brought him in to solve this case?
That's in Rojo Part 2. Yeah. Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully next year.
Yeah.
Are there any other
No,
questions?
actually, I mean, to my, of course, there are ties, loose ends in the script, but I think it has to do with an overall complicity. Like the guy who hired him, he just did it because of his wife who was alienated. He didn't mind so much about. I think maybe he knows and doesn't care. Maybe they won't follow through. It was a time of just letting things be. People didn't want to ask the wrong questions or get into the wrong places. Everybody was looking after what they had and keeping to themselves. Yeah, that would be the right answer.
Thank you.
I saw the commercial with the man eating the candy. It looked like it was really from the time. Was it, and why did you use it?
The commercial of the man eating the candy and then pointing with the gun, it looked like it was really from the time. Was it? And why did you use it?
Sure, that's a commercial from 1974, so it is absolutely from the time. I think it's shocking. I think it's amazing, and it gives us a clear look into what the naturalization of violence was at the time. Naturalization of guns, of selfishness. I think it's a clear portrait of what the movie is trying to deal with. Also, it's sort of a breather in the middle of the plot, to maybe have a laugh and just keep going to the end. Yeah.
Questions? I think
Okay.
we thank you so much for
Thanks a
being
lot.
here today.
Thanks for staying.
Thank you to Benjamin
Yeah.
Neistat.
Thanks. Gracias.